drive from here back to Evansville and not realize that I didn't. Have you ever done that? You're driving home from work, it's a common route, it's just routine. And you get in the car, and then you get out of the car and you're like, man, I don't even remember. I don't remember the drive. And that's what happened to the Jews. It just became an external thing. They lowered their standards to the point where in their heart they weren't living right. But on the outside they just want to make sure that at least, you know, all right, let me show up to church, let me return my tithe, let me sit and be a good person in church. But then in the privacy of their homes, it's whatever they wanted to do. Because for them, they had fulfilled the requirements. They had, and that's what the scribes and Pharisees were doing. On the outside, they looked like they were doing everything right. But Jesus says, within, they're nothing but dead men's bones. They're just whitewashed graves. And we today are no different. Because it's human nature. That's all it is. It's human nature. It's human nature for us to look at God's standards. And when we first come to the Lord, aren't we gung-ho for the Lord? Aren't we excited for the Lord? Aren't we the first at church praising God and just lifting up His name and just glorifying Him? But as we start mingling with the church folks, there's this corporate attitude. And instead of keeping that standard and trying to help somebody else up to that standard, we start going down and down and down. And before you know it, you know, we start missing, we don't do the Sabbath school lesson. So because we don't do the Sabbath school lesson, we don't want to come to church because it's embarrassing when you come to church and somebody asks you a question or even asks you plainly, how many people did the Sabbath school lesson? And you see people raise their hands and you know you're in the house of God, much less you don't want to tell no lies, so you don't raise your hands, and so you start feeling embarrassed, and then after a while you just start finding yourself, well, I'm not going to go to the Sabbath.
Right, there you go.
Day service. You know, and then the preacher started preaching some things, and he's touching on some things that you're doing in your life. Because you see, initially you thought when you came to the Lord, He fixed everything right away, just like that. But then you realize that, wait a minute, there's still some struggles going on. And the pride that you felt in your righteousness, you start to see that it's nothing but filthy rags. And so the preacher starts touching on the nerves, and you find yourself missing church once a month. At least once a month. And before long, you find yourself out of church, period.
Oh, really?
I'm talking about the standards.
Standards.
You see, if you only keep the law of God, you will get to the place where you will no longer keep the law of God.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
That's true.
If you only keep the law of God, if you're so focused on, well, I got to do this right, and I got to do that right, trust me, the devil will wear you down and wear you out. Because all it's based upon is your performance. You would be no different from the CEO or the businessman who's trying to do everything possible to make it to the top. He will sacrifice his family because he wants to make sure, and it's weird, he wants to make enough money for his family, so he sacrifices the time with his family so he can make enough money for his family. So what I'm saying is, the law of God is just one side of it. It's not the whole part. And the children of Israel, after Mount Sinai's event, as time went on, they were more focused on the external aspects of the law rather than the internal aspects of the law.